explosion on the bus, was it?
Yes, there's people lying in the road. There's a London bus. There's people dead and everything by the looks of it.
The day terrorists brought carnage to London, a series of explosions ripped through the city at rush hour.
4 bomb blasts in a 60-minute period. 3 tube stations were targeted, as well as a double-decker bus.
On July the 7th, 2005, I was a serving officer with the Metropolitan Police, and on that day I was on the Circle line travelling towards Aldgate when the explosion happened. I was able to render assistance to some of the injured people in the carriage.
On the 7th of July 2005, I suffered severe life-changing injuries. I lost my left foot. I had severe injuries to my right foot. I lost my hearing. I am, however, though, consider myself to be very fortunate, because I am here today to tell my story, whilst 52 innocent victims lost their lives.
On the 7th of July 2005, I was at work in Manchester. That morning, my son David, who was just 22, had travelled down to London for the first time on his own. I knew he was getting on the Circle line. I saw what had happened and just went into meltdown. A week later, we had a phone call from 2 police officers telling us they needed to come and see us to confirm that David had been killed at Edgware Road. Hello. Love you loads, Thelma, you know that.
Graham, Thelma and Liz have a friendship that was forged by terror.
Nice to see you again.
It's so lovely to see you all after so many years.
For 20 years, they have shared their grief and their pain and their anger. As they walk through the memorial to those who were killed on July the 7th, they carry with them their memories of that terrible day.
When I got onto the train, as it moved from Liverpool Street, I got a signal on my phone. So I typed a text, and as soon as I pressed send, I didn't hear an explosion, but I felt as if I was lifted from the floor and I was circling around. I could see a very bright white light, even though my eyes were closed, and I could hear screams, but from a very distant point. I felt as if I was circling around for a very long time. And then eventually when I woke up, I found myself on the train tracks, part of me under the train, part of me outside. And I had part of the train door on my thigh. I could see bodies lying around, and I could see men with yellow-orange jackets. And I put my hand up and says, help me, I'm alive, I don't want to die. And then 2 people came to my help, and they're guardian angels. One was Colin Pettit, who was a passenger, then Tony Silvestro, who was a plainclothes policeman, who was working in a building across Aldgate, came to my help, and they said to me, you need to lie down because you might have severe internal injuries. And he kept asking me questions. What's your name? Where do you work? What do you do? Are you married? Do you have children? And he kept asking me those questions over and over again. At one point I said to him, why do you keep asking me the same questions over and over again? Of course, I subsequently realized because I was in and out of consciousness, he was just trying to keep me alive.
I heard shouting, people shouting from the carriage heading towards the front of the train, towards Aldgate. And I thought, this must be something serious. I walked through towards the front of the train, and the next compartment was very apparent that something was badly wrong. So I wriggled into the carriage, and then I saw that there were multiple casualties and people were clearly dead. One person was trapped by an arm in the debris. 2 casualties on my right had got lower limb injuries, and I thought, why is that person sitting with their feet up on the windowsill? And then I realised, of course, that the bomb had gone off and she'd been blown like that. And the other person was next to her with leg injuries. But I reassured them. I said, you know, help's here. You know, you're going to be all right. I'm a police officer. I got my jacket off, did some first aid.
You saved lives that day, Liz.
Well, I did my best for them, and they were alive on the train, and I was hoping that they were going to stay alive, fortunately they did.
You're amazing.
Put the telly on, and I remember those first few hours. It was a Thursday, and there was a casualty bureau phone number that kept coming across. We must have phoned that number 1,000 times. And they simply just took your name, detail, and who was missing, and that was it. And then they put the phone down. Wow, we didn't go to bed that night. We just spent the whole night watching the news. And I tried to phone every hospital, because the reports were that there were a number of unidentified people who were unconscious. So we sort of clung on to the hope that it must have been David. So that was Thursday. Friday, I have no idea what we did on Friday. I know it was pretty much the same. And then on Saturday, so 48 hours later, middle of the day, there was a knock at the front door. I ran to the door, and there was a young police officer, but in plain clothes, with a warrant card, and said, I need to come in. And she said, look, I'm from GMP, Greater Manchester Police. I've no idea why, but I've just been asked to come and take mouth swabs from you and Janet. So she came in, took the mouth swabs, gave them to a motorcyclist, and then she left. So that was Saturday. Sunday, I went out and bought every newspaper. We had them all over the floor in every room, and we read every inch. I spent all day doing that. And then on Monday, I had a phone call at last, and it was somebody who identified them as a police officer, who said, we need David's dental records. Could you just pop down to his dentist and get a copy, please? And I remember thinking, I haven't been to bed for 3 days. I haven't had a wash or a shave. I must smell. And by the time I got home, there was a police officer waiting for them. And again, he took the records and vanished. So that was Monday. I've no idea what happened on Tuesday. I've no memory of that at all. And then on Wednesday at 6:20, my phone went, and it was a police officer who said, I'm a family liaison officer. Are you at home? I need to come and see you. So that was difficult. I can't describe that. It's just a moment in time that nobody should have ever have to experience.
"52 people lost their lives in the attacks across various sites on London's transport network, bringing the city to a standstill. The information vacuum in the hours and days that followed meant that the chaos caused by a terrorist attack was multiplied. While the authorities established what had happened and who had been affected, people at the centre of the atrocity felt lost and abandoned.
I am involved in a terror attack. Do you think the first thing I'm going to do when I get home is to go on the website to find out? No. You should be telling me what I can access, not me going on the internet to find out. Does everyone have the computer? When I woke up in the hospital, when I thought it was the next day, I had men in white coats surrounding my bed, and they then said to me that unfortunately they couldn't save my left foot. I got a limb, and then when you get to the stage where they have to cover it, it's like going into a shop. You choose one. It's not bespoke, and none of the colours matched my skin tone. I had lost my self-esteem. I didn't want to walk down the street, people looking at me. I didn't want to. I wanted to be as normal as I could be in the circumstances. And it was a real battle. I wrote to everyone, the Secretary of State and all that sort of thing. I was able to go to Dorset Orthopedic Hospital to have a limb made for me. And you know, it's very close to my skin tone. If I don't tell you I've got it, you wouldn't know. Now, I was able to argue and fight. I'm a lawyer, so I sat at home. I had nothing to do. I need to keep busy. I found everything I could about amputation and amputated limb and prosthetic cover, the different stages. But what about people who don't have that voice?
Your jaw is on the floor because you can't believe these things. You have to ask for these things.
Yes. You are forgotten, basically. That's the way we see it. You know, it's like we're the forgotten people and you have to cope on your own. And it's worse if you didn't live in London and you came to London and were affected in London, and when you go back to where you come from, you're the only one there. It's even worse.
The liaison was very, very poor. I think, in fairness, because it was such a big event, I was in limbo for a week, not knowing whether those people had survived, because nobody would tell me anything.
We heard at the inquest that on the 7th of July at 3:30, everybody that had died on the day had been identified, and yet nobody came to tell us. They left us at home on our own, wondering. And it's simply not possible to describe where Janet and I were for those 7 days while we waited to hear. It was cruel, and it was unnecessarily cruel, and I hope the people that made those decisions rot in hell, frankly.
Terrorism came back to Britain again and again in the years after 2005. Learning of the details of the Manchester Arena bombing was, for Graham, Liz and Thelma, reason for despair. Deficiencies which had been identified in the emergency response on 7/7 were repeated. Recommendations made about changes in procedure were not implemented.
Her Majesty's Inspectorate carried out what I would call an audit of the police forces, the ambulance services and the emergency fire brigade. And what it showed was that although the chief execs and the senior directors knew of this, they hadn't followed it at all. That report also said that because these protocols have not been implemented, it is likely that in the event of a major event, emergency services like the paramedics will not get to the site of the event quickly, and lives may well be compromised and even lost. That report was published 1 year before Manchester.
I was truly shocked, especially when I heard that a security guard had spotted the guy and was anxious about being accused of racism or something along those lines. I thought, really? Exactly. I thought, please, please. And knowing that the responders didn't go in to help people, I know that the first duty of first aid is not to become the casualty. That's number one rule, because if you're a casualty, you become a casualty, you're just a nuisance to everybody else, which is something I took into account when I was doing what I did on the day. Yeah. Didn't want to become a casualty myself, but I wanted to make sure I looked after people. But sometimes, I'm afraid, it requires courage, it takes initiative, it takes resourcefulness, and that's things that you have to drill into people.
It's reported several other people are injured on Westminster Bridge.
The third fatal terrorist incident in the UK in less than 3 months.
In the 20 years that have passed, there's now a whole generation. We've just watched a whole pile of teenagers walk past. And for them, it is now, sadly, normal for them to hear in the news or see online that another terrorist attack has been foiled, saved, or somebody's been charged with terrorism. So that is now routine life, which is a dreadful state of affairs. And so the question is, how do we get around that?
7/7, the terrorists were not from abroad. They're all here. Many of them born and bred here. The Manchester inquiry, all the Manchester, all the ones, I'm aware of, they're not people who came from abroad. They may have gone abroad to train, but they're all born and bred British. How do we work together as a community? How do we find ways to engage in dialogue with people who have views or feelings or things without resorting to that kind of thing?
These people that have done this to us are radicalised people. They're young people who've been twisted and brainwashed by other people to doing this. I mean, Tanweer, who bombed us, was I think he was only about 20, and the older, even younger, yeah.
18.
Yeah. The oldest was only 30, but was a married man who should have really known a lot better.
With a baby?
With a baby.
And his wife is pregnant.
Yeah, how do you get through to people like that? Doing his silly little broadcast saying, oh, this is a war and I'm a soldier. No, you're not. You're not a soldier, you're a coward. Because soldiers fight soldiers. They don't blow up innocent people who are going about their business on the underground. I'm afraid I have nothing but contempt for those sorts of people. I don't forgive and I don't forget.
It is difficult for all of us, but for me, I speak up because somebody's got to speak up. The world mustn't forget, the country mustn't forget, society mustn't forget.
You all right? Janet and I stopped being an ordinary family on that day, but we live in a very ordinary world. We've spent 20 years pretending to lead an ordinary life, but when we go to bed at night we know we haven't led and we don't lead an ordinary life.